So, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me well.
Hello. Hello.
So, now please welcome our today's speaker for the next hour, which is Kelly Culver. Hello, Kelly. Nice to have you here.
Hi.
Kelly is a passionate social and public entrepreneur. She's the founder and director of the Culver Group and the Culver Group Global Business Center. She's also in a consortium. She's also a consortium partner of, I think it's ICAT, a global consultancy focused on quality assurance, monitoring and evaluating that informs the capture of knowledge for adaptive management, learning, capitalization of experiences, and impact assessments. She's a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, Manufacturers and Commerce, internationally recognized for her leadership in public sector transformation in the small developing states and Commonwealth countries. Kelly is a management consultant, action learning coach, professional trainer, and mediator. She has lived and worked in a number of developing countries in the Caribbean and Africa and spends all of her time on projects outside of Canada. Like many of us, right now she's grounded, adapting to the changing nature of work through converting programs into interactive virtual collaborations, connecting with groups around the world, Zooming, MS Teaming, and Skyping at all hours of the day and night in multiple time zones. Wow. So Kelly, I hope this summarizes it a little bit. Thanks for being here with us and talking about innovation for transformation in times of uncertainty. The stage is yours.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak this afternoon. It's easy for me because I love what I do. And actually the opportunity that you've afforded me comes at a really interesting time, and I'll explain a bit of that a bit later. Now, if you've got questions for me, you can post them, and if I hit share screen, how's that? Can you see that?
Yes.
Yay! Now let's see if I can make it big. There. So innovation for times of innovation for transformation in times of uncertainty. I worked with, or I had the pleasure, the opportunity, the privilege to work with JCI. I guess it would be Asia, Africa last year with Vershini when I was in Mauritius. And I was a panelist on some pitches that people were making from around the Middle East and Africa on new business development initiatives, and it was absolutely fascinating. And I was really struck by the energy in the room and the creativity in the room. And so when Vershini asked me if I wouldn't mind joining you for a few minutes this afternoon, I was actually really grateful for the opportunity. So thanks to you that you've given me a chance to talk to your group. So here I am. I'm in Canada right now. I'm in London. That usually freaks people out because, you know, when people think of London, they think of the UK, but there actually are 3 other Londons in the world. One's in California, one's in Ontario, and one's somewhere else in the States, but I call it Little London. So this is me. This is my workplace. I wanted to highlight for you all of the different places that I've worked in my career around the world. I work in international development and cooperation. The spots where there are green X's are places where I have some kind of a strategic interest or a business interest. I've worked with the United Nations, the UNFPA, the World Bank, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the Commonwealth Secretariat. Right now I'm working with the Swiss Development Corporation and the Australia Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I've worked with the World Health Organization, and with governments in Barbados, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, Belize, and most recently Mauritius. So all of my work is outside of Canada. And yet right now I find myself here and adapting to a new reality, like all of the rest of you. And in many ways we're forced to adapt pretty quickly. And I'd like to spend some time on that theme in my discussion. So I had a fabulous introduction, way more information than probably any of you needed or wanted, but I'm the director of 2 companies, the Culver Group, which is based in Canada. I started that in 2001. and the Culver Group Inc. Global Business Center in Mauritius, which I started in 2019. And that's a management and professional services consultancy that leverages opportunities in Africa, Asia, and Europe. And the reason I took that decision is that Canadian banks don't necessarily like to invest in Africa projects. So I wanted to use the opportunity that Mauritius gave me to be able to change how I do my business and where I'm centered. I also work with two other people. We have a consortium of work with the Swiss Development Corporation, so that's the ICAT Quality Assurance Trainers. And I'm a partner in a consultancy in Australia called Alls Africa, where we're looking at linking innovations between Australia and Africa. And finally, this year I started a foundation in the Netherlands called I Impact, You Impact. And the reason I'm giving you a bit of an overview of this is more to say that each one of these things that you see on the screen marks a moment of transformation and innovation for me, where I had to adapt to a set of changing circumstances. And what I'd like for you to think about is that nothing is impossible. Absolutely nothing is impossible when you're faced with, there's a wall in front of you. You change it and you look for those plan Bs. And so I've had a lot of different plan Bs in my life, and it's made a map that looks kind of interesting for someone who graduated with a degree in English and history, which has absolutely nothing to do with any of the work that I'm doing right now. But what about right now? What's going on right now? So you asked me to talk about times of uncertainty. And I wanted to start with a couple of these pictures. The one on the left, the zebra on the left, was taken in the Ngorongoro crater in Tanzania. And the one on the right was taken in the Masai Mara in Kenya. My husband took both of these on different safaris that we were on in the last decade or so. And the reason I wanted to start with these pictures is that for me, in our world, challenges are becoming way more complex and interconnected, and change is happening at an often constant and unprecedented rate. It's not slow like the zebra on the left. Countries and governments and organizations and individuals need to start responding to these challenges, being flexible and agile and looking at different solutions and creative in how they approach innovation. And for me, innovation, at its most basic form, innovation is a catalyst, and it's a connector for people to imagine and create their own solutions to complex challenges. I believe innovation happens through practical exploration, through problem solving, co-creation, experimentation, and taking a systemic approach to better understand the complexity and interconnectedness of the system of things. When I look at what's going on right now, I see three things. Number one, we are in a state of business as unusual. And this better reflects the dynamic circumstances that are going on around the world today and that we will continue to face post-COVID. The global context, I think, requires a different approach and this approach will be ongoing. The change will be ongoing. Secondly, all of you, like me, we are learning resiliency and we are adapting to the changing nature of work. So technology is changing how we connect and how we communicate. Like you, here at the Culver Group, we've had to, we're Zooming, MS Teaming, Skyping at all hours of the night. Lots of times I start my day at 2 in the morning because I'm working with the Swiss Development Corporation. They're 6 hours ahead of me. So that's how you go. But this shift in online workspaces will be critical to enable and continue to enable brainstorming and creative thinking and analysis and project management. And these kinds of virtual tools will become more and more and more meaningful and more powerful. On the other hand, it's a great opportunity. So today, we're all connecting with different people that we might not otherwise ever have a chance to meet. So this innovation provides us with an opportunity. And the third thing I think that's going on right now is that we understand that as uncertainty calls for urgent agility. Practical improvements across the globe are only going to come through collaboration and co-creation and co-production to really come forth with more impactful outcomes. And so what do I mean by that? As countries, as companies realize they have to tackle the widening gap in income disparity, gender inequality, climate change, those kinds of things, they're going to have to engage with people more, with citizens more, because our citizens are better informed, they're better educated, their expectations are constantly changing and shifting. And so governments and corporations and civil societies will need to adapt more quickly to a wider range of perspectives in how they make policy decisions. What does it mean? We need to start designing how we work and what we do and our programs and services around people. And that works better when we collaborate with people and stakeholders, which is a long introduction to say, what on earth does this have to do with innovation and transformation? What's the connection? Imagination is at the center of all problem solving, anywhere. Einstein captured that, I think, the best. Innovation is about creativity, imagination, and vision. And impact is the power to bring about a result on another. So when we start to look at transformation in the work that I do around the world, I believe that transformation occurs at the intersection of conflict or constraint. So we can't, we don't want to, we lack imagination. Possibility, which is imagine it, make the choice, believe in yourself, and resiliency, which means you have to invent or innovate or grab the opportunity or do it in order to make a sustainable impact. And I think all of these things are captured with the image on the left of your screen. Imagine, choose, believe, do, because try is permission to fail. And that's why I've taken the word possibility and I've put it in different colors. You think about that for a minute. If you can imagine it, make the choice, believe in yourself, and do it, you will have a good roadmap for transformation, you will have a good roadmap for innovation, and you'll have a good roadmap for resiliency. There's a number of studies on how conflict or constraint sparks innovation and resiliency. We know that people who embrace opposing demands tend to be more creative, flexible, and productive, which means their performance is enhanced. And this is a little bit of a paradox. My observation in business is that businesses or people tend to start transformation with the constraint. They say, we can't, we've never done that before, people won't get on board, I don't have what it takes to be successful. And I hear this in transformation projects in countries I work. Vrishini and I have that common experience on a project we worked on together in Mauritius. It's really, really common. It's because people won't allow themselves the possibilities of thinking differently. I'll give you a perfect example. If I went back to that screen and I showed you those two, the zebra and the lion, that was taken in 2011. I was at a Commonwealth conference and Kenya came forward with a concept called M-Pesa. And M-Pesa was a way to transfer money using a mobile phone. This is 2011. So people who were working in Nairobi could choose to transfer money back to the village for their families. They could have job interviews. They could vote, and the government made sure that one elder in each village had a mobile phone. And that's how they started to connect people. So M-Pesa now is the banking system of Kenya. And in 2020, all kinds of different countries from Europe even are wanting to know what that technology looks like and how to do this. But in 2011, when Kenya approached Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia on whether they were interested in having a pilot project, all three countries said no. They said, what does a developing country have to teach us? They didn't allow themselves to think of the possibilities. They didn't imagine a different kind of a future. I'll give you another example. Last month, I was at a World Economic Forum Great Reset call with the prime ministers of Colombia, Rwanda, and Israel, and it was about digital transformation. And the World Economic Forum last month produced data to show that the world has accelerated ahead 5 years in digital transformation in April and May this year. So the digital economy and creative economies moved ahead 5 years in only 2 months' time. We had absolutely no other choice. We had to become resilient. We couldn't listen to the constraints. We had to push ahead with different kinds of possibilities. And sometimes that means a leap of faith. So here's an example from EduTech. We've been talking about EduTech, in Canada and other countries probably for 10 years, but we really had to get serious this year. And this year, what exactly does that mean? And if you think about it, the forum today is in some ways a derivative of EduTech. We've had to move from the industrial age to the net age. We've moved from isolated classrooms to wireless. We've moved from the concept of library to cybrary. From subject-centered curriculum to interdisciplinary curriculum that's focused around teams. We've gone from teachers instructing us to constructing how we learn. We've gone from 2D to multidimensional, teachers to learners. We've gone from institutes of learning to integrated learning. And I think most importantly, we've gone from knowledge, so I acquire knowledge because I go to school, to now I have to exhibit my understanding of what I have learned in order for me to be successful. And this EduTech shift literally happened overnight. We also have studies from a business school in Paris where employees from different companies were asked to, for example, look at, we want you to minimize costs and we want you to maximize innovation. And when they were given those two sets of instructions, they came up with solutions that were far more creative because they didn't have any barriers. They weren't having to say, I'm working within all I can do is contain cost. If I can contain cost and be innovative, we know we have data and evidence that people are far more creative. So we have invention, we have innovation, and we have resiliency. And it all starts with this. Ask yourself this question. What if anything were possible? Take the elevator approach when you ask yourself this question. Start with yourself on the ground level. And as you move up through your organization, you go to the highest level of national government, you go up into the stratosphere because there are no limits. What if we let our imagination and improvisation and sense of discovery flow freely? What if we converge and collide at an intersection that leads to solutions and innovation? And can we use this process to explore, imagine, integrate, and act? Here's a picture of what I mean. This is called a tridge. This tridge lives in Midland, Michigan. It's the only bridge like it in North America. And it crosses a river on 3 points. And it's built in the style of Frank Lloyd Wright. Because Frank Lloyd Wright lived in this area. And there's phenomenal architecture in a small little town of 30,000 people in the middle of Michigan. If you think about this intersection at the middle there, there's no wrong turn. There's no wrong door. What if we converge and collide and allow ourselves to look at solutions so that whatever door or whatever turn we take, there's a solution at the other end. That, for me, is part of the essence of transformation and resiliency. Or this. Here's another thing to think about. I'll leave you with sort of 4 tools, practical tools for you and your organization. Innovation as part of transformation is a combination of a number of elements. The 4 tools I'd like to talk to you about are empathy, inspiration, invention, and design thinking. I'd like to talk to you about seeing things through a different lens. So the boats on the right are from Malta, and you'll see there's an eye on them, and that's sort of the evil eye to ward off evil spirits, to see things differently. The picture on the right, it was taken in Barbados, and it's a picture through a picture through a picture to look and see things differently. So empathy. One of your tools is empathy, having a deep understanding of something. So who we design for, who we collaborate with, who we're problem solving with. Empathy is human-centered. And today, as we move forward in a new economy and a new chance to do things differently, a human-centered approach has to become your playbook. It's the only way to think. It's the only way to assess and evaluate and build things together through a human-centered approach. Collaboration and co-creation are vital to innovation and finding solutions for people and for the planet. The second one is inspiration. So inspiration is what grabs us at an emotional level and calls us together for something greater. So we have a common purpose, a common set of values, a collective vision. Inspiration is driven by possibilities and options. And inspiration capitalizes on our learning and growing knowledge. If you can inspire people around a common set of objectives or a common theme, you'll be way more successful in any kind of transformation or change or innovation initiatives, both within yourself and within your organization. The third one is around invention. Earlier today, when we were listening to Christian on the art and the science of serendipity, where we heard about luck, the art and science of luck. I like to describe my consulting company in Mauritius as a platform that harnesses the art and science of opportunity. Too often when we use the word invention, we're thinking about science. And it's high time that we start taking the art part more seriously, and we start inventing for tomorrow, creating something that does not exist. So we need empathy and imagination and inspiration and artfulness in how we think and how we solve problems, in order to grow something that's different in the future than what we have today. And that's what transformation is all about. Walt Disney said that powerful futures are created first in the mind and next in activity. And the fourth one is design thinking. Design thinking builds resiliency into organizations and helps people get things done. Design thinking helps you solve wicked, complex problems. We're dealing with wicked problems today. A wicked problem is where a solution requires a great number of people to change their mindsets and behaviors. And they can be messy. Things like migration are wicked problems because they're messy. I like messy things. I like wicked problems because they can be a spark for inclusive, positive disruption. But in a lot of times in transformation initiatives, people want to bury the wicked problems. They don't want to acknowledge them. They don't want you to find them. I've had that happen all kinds of times. In Canada, we would say, this is the dead stinky moose that's in the middle of the table that everyone's trying to ignore. But you have to deal with it because it smells. So we use design thinking here to collaborate across differences and ensure that there's information and transparency, and we're all focusing on the right solution. So how do we bring it all together? This picture is from Namibia. This is where the desert meets the sea. And that happens in 2 places in the world, only 2. One is Namibia and the other one is in Morocco. And if you went to this same spot day after day after day, it would look different. The sand changes, the sea changes. And yet this has been happening for over millions and millions of years. This spot transforms every day. It becomes resilient to its environment. It adapts to its circumstance. It isn't just a desert. It isn't just the ocean. It's a constantly evolving system. So I think all of us right now are transitioning and transforming into a new normal, and we need to look at the world through a different lens. Those who see opportunities and adapt more quickly will be more sustainable and resilient in the longer term. So I'll leave you with how do I see innovation, transformation, and resiliency? I think innovation and transformation are tools for the strategic management of ideas and collaboration and finding solutions to shared and relevant agendas. I think innovation and resiliency, more importantly, are building blocks to accelerate how you manage the turbulence and complexity of our world. Without innovation, there is no resiliency. And without resiliency, surviving becomes really, really tough. All three are necessary to navigate and succeed in times of uncertainty, coming out the other end renewed and rejuvenated and on top of your game. So good luck.
Kelly, thank you very much for your speech. I opened the round for a Q&A. It was very interesting what you said. So if in case you have any questions for Kelly, please post them in the chat. I would start right away with a question I had, and it's also a little bit about the picture you just have here. So you said the sea and the desert, they had to adapt to the circumstances, but they didn't do that overnight, right? So you also said that you were grounded, and I think you said the world had to adopt overnight. So you also had to adopt to change nature of work more or less overnight. So what made you realize that the way you are working is not working anymore, or at least for quite a while, and how did you deal with that?
There's probably 2 or 3 ways to answer that question.
We take all the ways.
Okay, good, great. So I can be creative in my answer.
Yeah.
One of the things that I realized is that, and I think it's really important right now that and COVID has brought it out, is that we really need to work with each other. I think teams and the collective collaboration of people is way more important today than it was probably last year. We talk about teamwork, but right now, if we don't work in teams, we really aren't as successful as we possibly could be. If, like me, I'm grounded, yes, I'm here. My work is overseas, but I came back to Canada in March and the borders are still closed. But I've been able to, I'm fortunate enough to be able to change how I work with and the people that I work with have been willing to do that because we know that we don't have any other choice. And a lot of it's through trial and error. You know, a lot of it's through failure. That try is permission to fail. Failure allows for innovation. If you do something and it doesn't work out well, right now we are required to really quickly adapt and quickly adopt different ways of working. So for me, working with other people, working as a team, allows me to be way more creative, but it also builds up resilience in the fact that you can rely on other people to help you out, maybe in a way you might not otherwise do. As an independent, I'm not an independent consultant. I have a number of different companies that partner with people, but it's far easier now to work with other people as part of a team. And I also think that adopting different kinds of technology opens up possibilities and opportunities for different kinds of work that you might not have contemplated earlier.
Thank you very much. Talking about failures, you also mentioned this in your answer, and I think in your presentation it was to try is the permission to fail. So you're talking about something which is an active culture of failure, which is especially in terms of new work, something relatively new to some old-fashioned companies or even branches. Yeah. So what would you tell a manager or an executive even, why failing is something crucial to organizations, or even more specific for individuals as well, for their employees, for example?
This try is permission to fail. This actually, you can look at it through two lenses. This is the trademark and logo for the foundation, for my innovation foundation in the Netherlands. So because try is permission to fail, in one way, you have to allow a culture of failure in order to be able to succeed. People have to fail, they have to learn from failure. And some of the greatest inventions we heard this morning, you know, the concept of Viagra, that wasn't the purpose of how it was created. So we have to allow failure, because in failure, we're forced to innovate. In failure, we're forced to be resilient. In failure, we're forced to learn. But I'd like you to look at that try as permission to fail in a different lens. Turn the coin. If I say, I'm going to try to learn French, I'm giving myself permission to fail at that venture, because I use the word try. The word try is not a verb. It's not action. It's not doing. I am going to learn French. I will do this. If I use the word try, I'm giving myself a fallback plan of not achieving anything. So this is a bit of a play on words. We have to allow failure in order to innovate and be resilient. But we also have to take action and actually do something. So coming back to your question on why would we want to do this? How would we encourage managers or leaders at this point in time? We know that in times of profitability, that's the very best time to be looking at innovation, because you have the resources and you actually have the capital to do that. But that's not how corporations and businesses work. They wait until there's a crisis before they act. And so I think we look at the environment today, we have to look at it as an opportunity to be doing something different, and to hear a whole bunch of different voices that we might not otherwise have access to. And I think that's just a richer way of doing business. It's a richer way of working. The more inclusive we can be, the more successful we can be. And people are demanding that inclusivity right now. And as a leader or a manager, I think that's where you have to be focusing your time and attention.
Okay, so you think it's also a way how you formulate the way you're thinking, the way you're working. And so basically it's the same to say, I have to try to learn French, or I want to try to learn French. And the other way would be to say, I will learn French. The intention is the same, but the way you're like acting with it or dealing with it is a much more positive or optimistic way, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. Yes.
Okay, going to the chat, Christian provided us a question. Maybe we can take that as a next question. So Christian, would you like to read it out?
Yes, thank you very much. So my question is, isn't transformation and resilience tools to achieve another goal? And this goal is adaptation? Because if we just transform, what do we transform for? We transform in order to better adapt to our environment and survive. If we are resilient for what? And is it sometimes resilience hindrance for our actually adaptation? So I'd say that not even transformation and resilience are not important per se, but are important as much as we adapt. And I can give you actually an example, because I mean, I'm recently reading a book and I was impressed. So there is this animal, it's called the Diprotodon. This is a kind of, I don't know, like a bear from Australia that disappeared. It survived the first ice age, but the second ice age, when the humans came, he was not able to survive. So he was resilient. He was resilient to whatever is happening, but he didn't adapt to the new predator that showed up on Australian continent, which is the human. So I'd say that transformation per se doesn't matter as long as we don't adapt while doing change for the sake of change. And resilience doesn't really matter as long as we don't adapt to our environment. What's your take on this?
Oh, I agree. I agree. It's all about what we do. We can have transformation's a tool, resiliency is a tool, but it's how we use those tools. So how we adapt and how we adopt. I've stopped talking about sort of along that same line. I do a lot of work with the UN, and you know the Sustainable Development Goals are really, really important. The Agenda 2030, all countries around the world have signed the Agenda 2030. I don't believe in sustainability anymore. I think it's about resiliency, because as the United Nations defines sustainability, sustainability in some cases can just mean the status quo. So for me, it's more like the resiliency development goals, because we have to adapt and we have to adopt and we have to continue to change. It's a circle. The whole thing is a circle. We have innovation, we have transformation, we have resiliency, and it just keeps going around in a great big circle. We have to act. So I agree with what you've just said. I think they're all tools, they're all components. But if we don't do anything, adapt or adopt or act, we haven't gotten anywhere.
Thank you. Actually, I have other questions.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question is actually the following. So we can use this design thinking, we can use empathy, etc. But these are tools that may be useless until we feel the need to use them. So I would say that until we have this urgency to use this tool and solve a certain problem. So the question is, how can we motivate ourselves, or in which conditions these tools become useful to us?
I'll answer that at a national level. I work with governments in public sector transformation. Sometimes it's called civil service reform. And countries around the world are learning really quickly, and we're learning before COVID came along, that they have to change how they do their business, and they have to start listening to their stakeholders better. And the stakeholders are their citizens. What is it that the citizens want? Not necessarily what do they need, but what is it that citizens want? And how do we learn what citizens want? Well, we do that by asking. We do that by listening. We do that through using empathy. We do that through using the idea of design thinking, where we design our systems and programs around the users. And we're seeing across the world that citizens are starting to demand a different way of interaction and engagement with government. And companies are also following that model and changing to putting the user, we used to hear that a long time ago with IT projects, it's user-centered. What does the user want? Design it around the user. So a lot of this stuff comes from digital transformation and changing and technology transformation. But nonetheless, if we don't see the urgency, if we don't see the value in designing things around the people who are using them, then we won't be successful, and we certainly won't be profitable. If something is difficult for a user, they're not necessarily going to adapt or adopt that particular kind of technology.
Okay, Christian,
Yes,
question answered?
Yes.
Okay, I have another question regarding resilience. Once I read a book about an approach that being resilient is not something you can learn, but it's in our genes. So what is your opinion about the process of becoming resilient actually? So is it partially in our genes, or is it possible to learn it from scratch in situations like now? What do you think about that?
I think the answer is yes in both instances. As human beings, we're hardwired to be resilient. We've had to change and evolve over time. It's in our DNA. I absolutely agree with that. Having said that, when we're faced with a situation like you know, with the situation we have around the world right now, again, we have had to become resilient and creative in how we survive and how we succeed, how we continue to work, how we educate our children, how we eat, how we do our shopping, how we exercise. Why is it that the stocks on the stock market? So what's made the most money this year? Zoom, Peloton, bikes, because people are exercising at home, but they want the competition of being connected to other people. So for me, resiliency, yes, it's hardwired in our in our DNA as humans. It's how we've evolved over centuries of time. But it also is, you know, it's sort of like the necessity is the mother of invention in some ways around resiliency. I think it's both things. It isn't either or. It's a both and.
Okay, thank you. Bob has a question. Bob, would you like to read it out? It's also about resilience.
Oh, yeah. My question is for those people who have experienced failure on a constant basis, like have a history of failure in their endeavors, is it possible to develop resilience in those cases?
Oh, it sure is. It sure is. You know, it probably feels at the time that it's going to kill you, but you still wake up the next day and you still get dressed and you still move ahead. I think people who have had a number of failures actually are way more empathetic to the challenges that we all face. Failure, people, if we look at Steve Jobs, look at the different failures that he had before all of a sudden, you know, what we have in terms of what Apple has done is really quite extraordinary, and not in a very long period of time. I think that people who have failed over and over and over again actually are some of the most successful people that we can find. And they definitely are very resilient because they continue to go forward. They continue to move ahead. Failure is really important. Failure is very underrated. People are scared to talk about failure, especially in government. Managers in government are terrified to talk about failure because they're dealing with public dollars. So you don't want to have a budget statement that says, well, we failed at this and we failed at this and we failed at this and we spent all of these millions of dollars and we have nothing to show for it. People are terrified to talk about failure, but it's about risk. It's how do I assess the risk and what it is that I'm doing, and what's the return on that risk at the end. And failure may be part of that pathway, but that's okay because I've got the boundaries around the failure I am prepared to accept or the failure I'm not prepared to accept. I use risk management with the Swiss Development Corporation, and I divide it in 3 categories: bumps and bruises, hospital, and death. So when you're assessing risk, which one of those things is going to happen, and therefore you develop that strategy. But I think people who have had a lot of failures actually are very brilliant.
Bob, thank you for that question. Following up with that, so talking about failures or history of failure, maybe you had a couple of, or you had to face some drawbacks in these transformations in the last couple of months. So
Sure.
Talking about that, can you tell us a little bit more about these drawbacks and what did you learn from them?
I've had a number of drawbacks. It's a whole bunch, and I learn all the time in them. I think one of the areas of failure I can talk about is not adopting technology changes quickly enough. And that's around moving into a virtual workspace, a virtual environment. That's really, really important. I think maybe one that's even more important over the last 3 or 4 years, because my work is all overseas, I've had to convert my whole business into the cloud. And for a long time, I was carrying things around with me so that I would always have it available. And moving things into a cloud is a real leap of faith, because if you're working in an environment that doesn't have a very good connection, or if you're in the middle of the Amazon in Belize and there is no internet connection, you can't really do your work very well. So I've learned I have to understand my environment, and I have to understand it really quickly. The second thing I've had to learn in the past number of years in working with different countries is when I go in on a project, I have to do a lot of listening. I have to do a lot of listening, and I have to listen to a lot of voices, because the last thing people want to hear is that they're broken and I've come to fix them. That's a very arrogant view. And you'll be very quickly turned out, or you will be very quickly discredited. So I've learned that the hard way in the last 4 or 5 or 6 years. The other one that I'm grappling with right now, to be very frank, is this business that I have in Mauritius. I can't get there. I can't, there's not very much that I can do to kick it off. And if it doesn't show sort of a profit center, my company here in Canada is going to have to cut it loose. Or the Financial Services Commission in Mauritius will say it's not a profit-making venture, and they will cut me loose. So sometimes you take risks under the very best set of circumstances, thinking ahead as quickly as you can with a roadmap you think is really solid. And then something like COVID comes along and you have to say, all right, I've got to put that dream aside for a little while. So those are mine.
Thank you. I have another question about, again, coming back to business. I worked a couple of years as a manager in innovation and business transformation. So I know that transforming businesses through innovations is already something pretty uncertain. Even the times are not uncertain. So let's say I'm the CEO of a company, which I'm not, but if I would be, and I ask you, why should I transform my business and go this uncertain way, especially in a time that is full of uncertainty already? So how do you convince people to build this kind of bridge you were talking about, this bridge which goes to different ways? You showed us, and just how do you convince them to try it, to do it?
The only way you convince people to try anything in any kind, this is my experience, others of you may have a different one, but with my experience, the only way you convince people of anything is if you can show them a common purpose, a common vision, and you can show them where they will be in the future. If you can help them see that vision at the end of the road, even though the road might be a bit bumpy, if you can help them see the vision at the end of the road, you will be able to convince them that the change is worthwhile. If they cannot see themselves in that new world, if they cannot see themselves in that new vision, they won't go along with it, or their employees won't go along with it. Now, the last project I had in Mauritius, this was whole of government, public sector transformation, the whole thing. And if I couldn't show people where they would be at the end of that project, the end of that transformation, the end of that vision, they would do everything they can to make it fail. And then they'd say, I told you so. It wouldn't work. So you have to show people the vision in a tactical, practical, hands-on way, not using, a lot of jargon that people don't understand, or, drawing diagrams in the cloud. Give them the practical, tactical tools, or they won't go with you. And they have no reason to go with you. They have no reason to trust you.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. One thing, maybe you agree with me with that point as well. One thing I experienced was when I did a kind of consulting job with people, or do the consulting approach with other executives, for example, or other team leads or whatever. I always try to explain that they should break their frames and barriers they have in their mind. Like, for example, budget barriers, because they all have a mind like this. I have only this and that budget. Maybe next year I have this and that budget. But to think about transforming something in an uncertain, so to transforming something in an innovative way, so to be uncertain in the outcome, only works, I think, when you break up, when you break with barriers and all this kind of frames you have, and be like really innovative in your mind, right?
I absolutely agree with you. And too often I find that people, companies, governments will say to themselves, do I have the budget? The first question they ask is around money.
Yeah.
And if you start to design a project and all you're thinking of is, do I have the money to do this? You're not going to go anywhere. It's, what do we need to do? And then we work backwards to how do we find the money? And maybe we can't find the money, but we don't start with that concept. We start with the possibilities and we move ourselves back to the realities and then fill in the gaps.
Yeah. So we have 10 minutes before 2. Are there more questions from the audience? If not, I would close the session with one last question from me. Okay, no more questions here. So my last question is, we talked about a lot about the last month, what happened, what kind of drawbacks you had, and how everything changed. What is your expectation, or what is your idea of where we go from now?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I think we have an absolute phenomenal opportunity to build back differently, to build back greener, and to build back an economy that's way more inclusive. I think the opportunities that we have and the innovations, I think innovation is going to continue to occur at a pace that's unprecedented. And I think that those people who are open-minded and can connect all of those dots and can see things ahead will be way more successful than those people who continue to work in a silo or with a fixed view of how the outcome should be. Because none of us know what tomorrow's going to look like. None of us know what next year's going to look like. I think next year's going to be awesome, but you know what? It could be crappy, but I think it's going to be awesome. So I have to work with that kind of intent in mind and allow those things to come and be open to everything and always be looking, always look at the horizon.
This is also like a little bit closing the circle, what you said in the beginning, being optimistic of, you have to be optimistic of what will come in the future. In order to allow this innovative ways or thinking to spread all over the world and in the companies or whatever, or wherever they it might be.
That's right.
Kelly,
thank you.
Thank you very much for being here, for having this speech and this conversation with us. I really appreciated that, and I think I talk for everyone else as well. It was very, very nice, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to talk to all of you today. I wish you a good rest of the day, and I wish all of you the very best in everything that you do. Keep it up. JCI is a fantastic organization, and the fact that you're volunteering your time and connecting on a Saturday is really, really fantastic. So good luck to all of you, and thank you for the opportunity. So
thanks. It was a great pleasure. Bye. I hand over to Rashini again.